Fleming in the Philippines here. I hope you're all well. We haven't been making videos for a couple of weeks because, well, a number of reasons, but basically the holiday season and all that, you know. But I want to get back to do it, and the first one I want to make today is, I'll take these off because it's just distracting, isn't it? Is to do with the follow-up to my more recent one, which was about situational homosexuality. Now, people have asked, how does this explain other types of homosexuality? Of course it doesn't. Situational homosexuality only explains that particular form. Now, this is a very interesting thing because we use the example of prison sex, but there are numerous examples of this, and often it's not a question of people being locked up away from women or women being locked up away from men. It's a question of culture. In most cultures, women are protected. It's true. I know feminists hate me saying this, but the simple fact is that women are the protected class, and sexual relations with women, between young men and women, are basically disallowed in most cultures. Most young girls are not allowed to have sex with boys, and that's not because the men don't want sex. It's got nothing to do with the men. It's because the women don't want the girls to have sex, and the reason they don't is that they don't want these children to become a burden. They want what they want is for the young girls to be in a stable relationship with a man, which will provide for that the children that they might have to be looked after, cared for, provided for, without becoming a burden on other members of the clan or the family. Now remember, this is occurring a long time ago. This evolved long before civilization came along. Civilization's only been with us for about 10,000 years. That's a relatively short time. So what's happened is that you have situations across the world where girls are basically just not available. And so what happens is that there's a fair bit of sex happens between males, and this is absolutely common endemic in the Islamic world. It's absolutely endemic. Don't believe a word they say. It is all over the place, but it's not just there. It's everywhere, everywhere. And if you read the history on this, and I will do some pieces on the history if that interests you, then you'll find that really up until about 200 years ago, 250 years ago, even in the West, this was completely normal. The problem with prostitutes, in a tribal situation, they don't really exist to start with. It's really something that occurs with civilization. Yes, that's right, folks. Prostitution is actually a sign of civilization. In most of the cultures we're talking about here, it doesn't happen. There's no access. There is no way around this. The boys don't have any girls to play with, and so they play with each other. And that's basically what happens. But the point here is that this is situational homosexuality. So when they get a little bit older and they actually start looking for a wife to marry and live with, that will be at a point when they have the maturity to do this and to actually provide for a partner, then they'll absolutely stop playing with the boys and they'll start looking for a woman, and they'll marry that woman and have children. And this is absolutely normal. You'll find this in many, many cultures. And again, we've already discussed a few. I can do more if you want. It's not a problem. To start with, we're going to look at the most basic one, the one that we've discussed at great length here already. We'll go over it again slightly, and that is the thing that I call, and has been called by many people, sexual inversion. And this is actually where the child is sexually, affected, while something happens in the womb that will feminize a boy child for life and will masculinize a female child for life. And we call this sexual inversion. And typically boys who have this will be smaller, lighter, more frail. They won't like rough double games. They'll associate better with women, but they won't be having crushes on girls. They'll enjoy the girls' company as playmates, and they'll want to play with girl toys. They'll want to probably a significant number will at some stage want to dress as girls, and they may, adopt a female personality or a feminine personality. And these we would recognise also as being people who are very strong candidates for transsexual. It's in transsexualism, it's not really even transition. It just isn't, because transition would imply that they were going somewhere that they weren't already going. For a male sexual invert, and it's a scale of variation, so you get the ones who are relatively little affected, and those who are just so affected that, as Blanchard says, they're a Kinsey 7 or 8. And those ones really, for those ones, if they're male, to live as women is not a transition, it's just the expression of their natural end point in life. That's what they are. There's no point in trying to make them do something else. In fact, getting them to live as males, as men, would be to transition them. And the difficulty, of course, is identifying which ones we're talking about here. That's not so easy. Leaving that aside, that's the kind of classic sexual invert, who are highly feminized males who will often present as women. That's when people talk, when they think about homosexuality in males, that's usually what they think about. They're thinking about, these are not, they may be incredibly loving and empathetic and lovely people, but they're not usually pretty macho, and you don't find too many of them working as lumberjacks. Sorry, Monty Python, you just don't. You don't find too many of them doing these kind of, highly macho jobs. If you come to the Philippines, you'll find them all working, well, not all by any means, but you'll find a significant number working in hairdressing parlours, beauty salons, that sort of thing. They work in places where they're not expected to do hard physical work, just basically like women. So that's one group, but it's not the whole group. We already know that there are situational homosexuals. And what you have to understand, I think the thing that really must be made clear here is that people talk, this word gay, this is a baloney word, right, to start with, because it doesn't actually mean a particular orientation. It refers instead to, sorry, I cut myself shaving. It refers instead to a lifestyle which exists in the West. Now, there are people here in Asia who call themselves gay, but they don't mean the same thing. It's really fascinating. They just don't mean the same thing at all. Gay is a lifestyle. It's a politicized lifestyle. It is a set of identities, or really one identity with variations. And to be gay in this context, in the modern world, it's not even necessary to be attracted to the same sex. It just isn't. You're able to be gay as long as you basically aren't masculine, if you're a boy. And this has been the case for a long time. This began really in the 1980s, and I very much remember this being something that I saw. It was very clear in the Edinburgh of the 1980s when I was working there, when I was first at college and then working there, and there were lots of these boys, and they were basically what might later have been called emos. They were just not very masculine, and they kind of affected a certain effeminacy. And then what happened with them was that within this sort of gay milieu that they were attracted to, because it was colourful and stylish and, safe, relatively safe at least, was that there were some very powerfully predatory males, and these males would try to latch on to the boys and actually, penetrate them. They wanted to have sex with them, and they wanted to use them as sexual partners. And once the boys were a little bit older, well, they didn't want to know. And some of these boys would then go on to become predators in turn, right? But the whole point was really that this was a very strongly politicized lifestyle. What people have to remember is that during the 1980s, this lifestyle, which was very much a nascent thing at the time, it was just not really formed, it was kind of coming together. And who could possibly forget people like Jimmy Sutherland, Somerville, and Mark Almond, Tainted Love, this little hussy on television, strutting her stuff. It definitely wasn't a guy, But a big issue here was the politics, because within this, you were expected to follow a certain political line. You were expected to be very left-wing. You're expected to be a Labour voter. In Britain, Labour is kind of like the Democratic Party in the United States. It's a socialist party, and that would be fashionable. That's what you wanted to be. You wanted to be a socialist. You want to be gay. You could be gay. You want to be gay, be stylish, and have fancy clothes and stuff like that. It was still all right because you were gay. You see, you didn't have to look like a peasant worker revolutionary, like the Socialist Workers' Party guys. You didn't have to look like them. You could still be stylish and cool, as long as you were gay. And that was all right. You see, and you could fit into this sort of subculture of left-wing thinking. And what happened, and this is really a tragedy, you know, this really was bad. What happened in the late 1980s in particular was that HIV caught up with this, and it absolutely ripped the innards out of this lifestyle. And the reason it did that, and you go online and you'll find, you know, gays from that era saying, oh, wasn't it terrible, you know, our lifestyle was just totally destroyed. Well, the reason it was destroyed was most of them weren't gay, or at least a significant number weren't gay. You know, they were lifestyle gays, and that was it. And of course, when HIV came along, they went, I'm not touching that. You know, as soon as the first pictures came out of what happens, they didn't have any drugs then. There was no way of controlling it, and it was nasty. It's just not the same now. You know, it's not a thing to be terribly afraid of now. But then it really was. It was the death sentence, and that made the whole lifestyle extremely unattractive. Really, really, very unattractive, and that remained so for a very long time. It never really, you know, the gay lifestyle struggled to recover its position. If you take you know, there was always real homosexuals inside the gay lifestyle, right? And they were kind of like, look at all these kids, you know, and the predatory males amongst them, they thought it was great because there were all these young boys that they could predate on and use sexually and then discard. That's just the way it is. You know, somebody asked me about this kind of person, the predatory male top, and you have to understand these are not nice people. What they're actually doing is that their desire is to emasculate other males. And what they do, it's like kind of like a vampire, you know. It's like we'll suck the manhood out of this boy by penetrating him, because that's what was done to them, you see. And they think that they can recover their manhood by doing it to someone else, and that breeds an extremely unpleasant person. There's a few have appeared, you know, in popular culture and have become quite. But one that we might remember, if you're British, was a guy called Frankie Howerd. And Frankie Howerd was a comedian, you know, and he was very, very well known as being a seriously predatory male. And numerous other entertainers and comedians of his era commented on his habits. Bob Monkhouse. Both these men are dead, so they can't sue me. Bob Monkhouse, I remember an interview with him, and he was just appalled by what Frankie Howerd used to do. And he said, you know, they just constantly tried to turn you. He's constantly trying to get you in bed. You know, Bob Monkhouse is a fairly normal-looking guy, you know, quite a handsome guy, but not by no means effeminate or feminine in any way at all. But what you have to understand is that for this kind of gay, then they're not interested in femininity. That's why they won't touch trans women. What they're trying to get hold of is the masculinity and suck it out. That's what they are. So that's a little bit of an aside, but leaving that to one side for the moment. So this gay lifestyle that really sort of began to appear in the 80s, the late 70s, 80s, 90s, was dealt an almost completely mortal blow by HIV. But now it's kind of come back, but it's been supplanted by something else. In the early part of the 20th century, this turned round, and at first you started to have a real strong push towards lesbianism, and it was usually the sort of lipstick lesbianism, which there's some reasons for that, and I'll talk about them later. But one of the issues with that is it is basically a form of lifestyle lesbianism. You know, sometimes the people involved have been traumatized, something else. They just don't want sex with men. It's fair enough. I'm not going to argue with this. But what's interesting, from our point of view, because we talk a lot about transition and things like that here, is that the current trans cult, which I call transtrenderism, many people do, and it is a trans cult, that is exactly the same as the old gay cult that I was exposed to in the 80s. It's a lifestyle. It's absolutely a lifestyle. And you know this because they don't even transition. You know, I mean, cutting your hair and wearing some geeky glasses does not make a girl into a guy. You know, it really, really doesn't. And genuine transsexuals are doing everything they possibly can to actually be the other sex. But transgenders they don't want that. That's not what they do. And you go on their sites, you go on their forums on Reddit and wherever they hang out, and you know, they're actually hostile to people who say, well, you know, you should really take hormones. That's like, oh no, you're a medicalist. That's terrible. You're true scum. You're a medicalist. You know, we're too cutes. And it's just like, what the hell is all this about? And what it's about is a political lifestyle. It's a political statement. What they're saying is we're going to be left-wing. And, that's cool because left-wing's always cool and all that stuff. I don't know where they get these stupid ideas from, but that's what they think. And they're being taught by their professors who, remember, those professors grew up, or actually teachers is a better word, because the American sense of professor is not the same as the one that we use. Anyway, they're being taught by their teachers that, you must be left-wing, you must be cool. That's what's morally right, is to be left-wing. But they don't want to be old bores like their teachers. So, hey, let's be trans instead. And so a great deal of what you're seeing is actually a lifestyle issue. Now, this was addressed by Dr. Lisa Lipman in 2018. I'd actually written pieces about it before 2018, and she called it ROGD, or rapid onset gender dysphoria. And in fact, yeah, it is rapid onset. It does appear rapidly, but then other forms of gender dysphoria can appear very rapidly too. For example, autogynephilia. That can really just happen, and it certainly does here. We see that. But the real point is, you get accepted into a group who all think alike, who are all notionally left-wing, or whatever that fucking means, and your badge, the badge that shows who you are, you're in this club, is this idea that, I'm trans. I don't have to do anything to be trans, I just have to say I'm trans, and that is literally their position. I just have to think I'm trans, and I'm trans. It's as absolutely ridiculous as you can get. And I'm going to close very quickly, but that's why this whole thing has happened. In the 80s we had this gay lifestyle, which kind of has morphed from that lifestyle into this trans lifestyle. And you have to understand that, when gays got gay marriage, right, that was basically it. There's a thing called the law of diminishing returns, right? And the more you get, the less it's possible for you to get. And once they got that, it's like, what exactly are we campaigning for? Well, what is there left for us to campaign for? Are we just campaigning for the next president of the United States, even when we don't have a vote in the United States? And so what would actually happen is that lifestyle, that's the gay lifestyle, becomes unfashionable. It becomes unappealing because it's old and boring. It's already done all its stuff, Now what you have to do is you have to be able to force people to call you a man when you're obviously a woman. You've made no effort whatsoever to actually change the nature of your body, or even sometimes the way you dress. All these people are just same clothes. But, no, today I'm trans. I'm going to stop that there because I will do another one on the complete nonsense of non-binary. But there, just for just now. We'll see you later.